Maria Gonzalez hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 11 days. The alarm read 4:47 a.m. She silenced it before it could wake the kids, pressed her palm flat against the mattress, and sat up slowly, the way a person does when their body has forgotten what rest feels like. The bedroom was small. One window. The streetlight outside pushed a thin orange line across the floor, and she followed it with her eyes for just a moment before standing. She moved through the apartment the way she always did in the early morning, quietly, deliberately, like the whole world was asleep and she was the only one holding it together. She was. She pulled on her uniform in the dark. Still damp from last night's diner shift. She didn't flinch anymore. In the beginning, 6 months ago, that small discomfort had bothered her. Now it was just part of the routine, part of the life she had built with nothing but 2 hands and a refusal to let her children go hungry. 3 jobs. 61 hours a week. And still, last Tuesday, she had stood in the kitchen under the yellow fluorescent light and counted $43 and some change to feed 2 children for the next 9 days. She had stared at that money for a long time. Then she put it in the envelope she kept behind the bread box, turned off the light, and went back to work. Maria was 31 years old. She had grown up in this same neighborhood, gone to the school 6 blocks away, dreamed the kinds of dreams that children dream when they don't yet know how heavy the world can get. She had been good at math. Her teacher, Mrs. Pacheco, had once told her she had the kind of mind that solves problems before they fully form. Maria still thought about that sometimes. She thought about it when she was mopping floors at 6 a.m., or refilling coffee cups at the diner, or folding sheets at the hotel on Clement Street. She thought about it and she smiled, not bitterly, but with a kind of quiet acknowledgement. She was still solving problems. Just different ones than Mrs. Pacheco had imagined. Her daughter Lily was 7. Her son Tomas had just turned 5 in March. Maria had made him a cake from a box she'd found on sale, yellow cake, white frosting, 4 candles because the store only had a pack of 4, and the way his eyes had gone wide when she carried it out of the kitchen was the kind of moment that makes every hard thing worth it. She kept that image close. On the bad days, she took it out and looked at it in her mind like a photograph. Lily had stopped asking for new shoes 3 months ago. That silence broke Maria more than any bill ever could. It wasn't the asking that hurt, it was the stopping. The moment a 7-year-old learns to shrink her own needs to fit the size of what her mother can give. Maria had noticed it on a Wednesday. Lily had looked down at her left sneaker, where the sole had begun to separate at the toe, and she had simply pressed it back down with her finger and kept walking. She hadn't said a word. Maria had turned away so her daughter wouldn't see her face. She had added shoes to the list. The list lived in the back of her mind, a running total of things her children needed that she was working toward, 1 shift at a time. New shoes for Lily. A winter coat for Tomas. A visit to the dentist for both of them, overdue by 7 months. Small things. The kinds of things that other families didn't think about twice. The kinds of things that, for Maria, required planning, sacrifice, and sometimes a specific kind of hope that had no evidence to support it, only will. That morning, she checked on the kids before she left. Tomas was sleeping with his arms thrown wide, the way he always did, taking up far more than his share of the small bed. Lily was curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek. Maria stood in the doorway for exactly the amount of time she could afford, 30 seconds, maybe, and memorized them the way she did every morning. This was why. This was all of it, every early alarm and damp uniform and aching pair of feet. It was right here in this doorway. She kissed her fingers and pressed them gently to the doorframe, then turned and walked out. Her neighbor Rosa would be in at 6 to get the kids ready for school. Rosa was 62, a grandmother of 5, and she refused to take a single dollar for her help. Every time Maria tried, Rosa waved her off with the same words, "You do it for mine." Maria knew she would. She also knew that without Rosa, none of this would have been possible. Some people come into your life and quietly become the structure that holds everything else up. Rosa was that. Maria took the stairs down to the street. Outside, the city was doing what it always did at this hour, breathing slowly, not quite awake, the garbage trucks and the early buses and the delivery drivers moving through the quiet like they all shared some private understanding. She walked the 4 blocks to the bus stop with her hands in her pockets, her breath making small clouds in the cold morning air. The 5:15 bus came on time. She climbed on, scanned her card, and moved to seat 12. Always seat 12. It was halfway back on the right side, next to the window, and in the 20 minutes it took to reach downtown, the light changed in a way that she had come to love, the city shifting from dark blue to gray to the first pale suggestion of gold. It was the only beautiful part of her morning, and she protected it. She sat down, leaned her head back, and closed her eyes. Not to sleep. Just to disappear for a few minutes. Just to exist somewhere quiet inside herself, in the small space between one hard thing and the next. She was thinking about Lily's shoes. She had done the math again, she always did the math, and if she picked up the extra Sunday breakfast shift at the diner, she'd have enough by the end of the month. It would mean leaving Rosa with the kids for another full morning, and it would mean 5 weeks without a single day off. But she had done 5 weeks before. She had done longer. She was still running the numbers when the bus slowed at the next stop and someone sat down beside her. She didn't open her eyes right away. People sat beside her sometimes. It was a bus. She kept her eyes closed and stayed inside her quiet. But then she became aware, the way you become aware of something without knowing exactly why, that the person next to her was still. Not the stillness of someone scrolling a phone or staring out the window. A different kind of still. The kind that belongs to someone who is present. Paying attention. She opened her eyes. He was older. 70, maybe. Silver-haired, neatly dressed in a wool coat that had seen many winters. He was looking forward, not at her. But in his lap, his hands were folded in that particular way that people fold their hands when they are genuinely at peace, not performing calm, but actually inside it. Maria looked back out the window. The city was turning gold now, right on schedule. She noticed her own reflection in the glass, the tiredness around her eyes, the 3 name tags she'd forgotten to take out of her coat pocket, each one from a different uniform, a different version of the same long day. She looked at them for a moment. She wondered, not for the first time, what her life looked like from the outside. She was about to close her eyes again when the man beside her spoke. His voice was unhurried. Warm. The voice of someone who had spent a long time talking to people who needed to be heard. "Cold morning," he said. Maria turned. He was looking at her now, not at the name tags, not at the uniform, not at the tired eyes. At her. With the specific attention of someone who had decided, before saying a single word, that the person in front of them was worth knowing. "It is," she said. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't need anything back. The bus moved through the gold morning, and Maria Gonzalez, who hadn't truly been seen in longer than she could remember, felt something shift in the air beside her. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just the quiet, certain feeling that something was about to change. His name was David. David Ellison. Retired teacher. 31 years in the Chicago public school system, 7th grade English, and he had the particular kind of warmth that only comes from spending 3 decades genuinely caring whether children understood what they were reading. He didn't lead with any of that. He simply said his name, and then he asked hers. "Maria," she said. He nodded, like the name meant something. Like he was filing it away carefully. Outside the window, the city was fully gold now, the early sun catching the glass faces of the downtown buildings and throwing light in every direction. The bus was filling up at each stop, construction workers, hospital staff, young people with backpacks, but the 2 seats where Maria and David sat felt somehow separate from all of it. A small pocket of unhurried air inside a moving world. He noticed the name tags first. Not intrusively, he didn't point or stare. But his eyes moved to her coat pocket for just a moment, and Maria saw it, and she waited for the reaction she usually got. Pity. That particular softening of the face that made her feel like something fragile rather than something strong. It didn't come. Instead, he said, 3 jobs. 3 jobs, she confirmed. How long? 8 months. He nodded again. Still no pity. Just acknowledgement, the way you acknowledge something real, something that deserves to be recognized without being reduced to a sad story. Kids, he asked. 2. 7 and 5. Boy and girl. Girl first, then boy. The girl's the serious one, he said. Not a question. Maria looked at him. How did you know that? He smiled. 31 years of firstborns. She laughed. It came out before she could think about it, a real laugh, small and surprised, the kind that doesn't have time to be performed. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed on the 5:15 bus. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed before 9 a.m. at all. David seemed pleased, but not in a self-satisfied way. In the way of someone who had simply hoped to bring a moment of lightness and was glad it landed. What do you teach? Maria asked. Past tense. She had heard it in the way he said 31 years, the way people speak about something that defined them but no longer contains them. Taught, he said. English. 7th grade. That's a hard age. It's a magnificent age, he said, with a conviction that was clearly the result of decades of believing it. They're just starting to understand that stories are about them. That every book ever written is actually a mirror. He paused. Most people don't figure that out until they're 40. 7th graders figure it out in November, and it changes them. Maria thought about that. She thought about Lily, who had recently become obsessed with a library book about a girl who builds a boat and sails to a place nobody has ever mapped. She had read it 4 times. Maria had wondered what her daughter saw in it. Now, listening to David, she thought she understood. My daughter's a reader, Maria said. His eyes lit up. Genuinely, completely. Of course she is. The bus slowed. Downtown was close now. Maria could feel the shift in the air that happened every morning at this point, the tightening, the return to the pace of the day, the weight of the schedule settling back onto her shoulders. She straightened slightly, the way a person does when they are preparing to carry something. David saw it. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. What would change things for you? Not fix everything, just change the direction. Nobody had ever asked her that. Not like that. Not as a real question, delivered without an agenda, with actual space left afterward for an actual answer. Social workers asked versions of it, but with clipboards. Friends asked versions of it, but with the particular helplessness of people who wanted to help but didn't know how. David asked it the way a man asks who has spent 31 years learning that the right question is more important than any answer. Maria looked out the window. She thought about it honestly. Childcare, she said. If I didn't have to worry about the kids being covered, I could take the kind of job that has hours. A real schedule. Something with benefits. She paused. And I'd need training. There's a medical billing program at the community college. 14 weeks. I looked it up 8 months ago. She stopped. She hadn't told anyone about the medical billing program. She didn't know why she was telling him now. Why haven't you enrolled? He asked. Because 14 weeks is 14 weeks of tuition I don't have, on top of hours I can't spare, on top of childcare I can't cover. She said it plainly, without bitterness. It was simply the architecture of the problem. It's not one wall. It's 3 walls at the same time. David was quiet for a moment. He looked forward, hands still folded in his lap, and he did what Maria would later describe to Rosa as the most valuable thing another person had done for her in years. He thought about it seriously. Not a polite pause. Not a transition to something encouraging but useless. He actually sat with the problem, turned it over, examined it the way a man does when he has decided that someone else's obstacle is worth his full attention. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his wool coat and took out a small notebook. The kind with a dark green cover, worn at the corners. He opened it, uncapped a pen, and wrote something down. There's an organization, he said, writing as he spoke. Been around since 2009. They work specifically with single parents who are within reach of a career change but caught in exactly the kind of gap you're describing. Childcare grants, emergency housing assistance if it's needed, and they have a direct placement partnership with 6 community colleges in the city. He tore the page out carefully and held it toward her. The woman who runs it is named Carol. She answers her own phone. Maria took the paper. She looked at it. A name. A number. A web address. How do you know about this? She asked. He capped his pen and put the notebook away. I helped start it, he said simply. After I retired. Seemed like the right use of the time. The bus stopped. Downtown. Her stop. Maria stood, the paper in her hand, and she looked at David Ellison sitting in the morning light with his wool coat and his worn green notebook, and she felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months of early alarms and damp uniforms and counted dollars. She felt like the road ahead of her, which had seemed to end at a wall, had just revealed a turn she hadn't known was there. "Thank you," she said. "Call Carol," he said. "Tell her about the medical billing program. She'll know what to do." Maria stepped off the bus. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment as it pulled away, the paper warm in her hand, the city moving all around her. Then she folded it carefully, tucked it into the inside pocket of her coat, not with the name tags, but separate, in the pocket closest to her, and she walked toward her shift with something in her chest that it took her half a block to name. It was hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind she sometimes manufactured to get through a hard week. Something sturdier. The kind that has a phone number attached to it. She called Carol that same afternoon, from the break room at the diner, with 11 minutes between the lunch rush and the start of her side work. Carol answered on the second ring. She listened without interrupting. She asked 3 questions, all of them practical, none of them condescending. By the end of the call, Maria had an appointment for the following Tuesday. She sat in the break room for a moment after she hung up, her phone face down on the table, and she thought about Lily pressing the sole of her sneaker back down and saying nothing. She thought about Tomas and his 4 birthday candles. She thought about the medical billing program she had looked up 8 months ago and quietly closed the tab on, because hope without a path is sometimes harder to hold than no hope at all. Then she put her phone in her apron pocket, stood up, and went back to work. But something was different now. The weight was the same, the hours, the tiredness, the math that never quite balanced. All of it still there. But underneath it, something had shifted. A door that had been sealed had opened just enough to let in light. And Maria Gonzalez, who had been carrying everything alone for so long that she had almost forgotten other arrangements were possible, walked back onto the floor of that diner with her head up and her eyes clear in the quiet, unshakable certainty that the direction of her life had just changed. On a Tuesday morning. On seat 12. Because a retired teacher with a green notebook had asked the right question and then, more importantly, actually listened to the answer.